A single misplaced tap on a phone screen. That's all it took to shatter her quiet, ordinary life. She answered a call by mistake, expecting a client, a friend, maybe a wrong number. But the voice that answered was cold, absolute, and carried the weight of a death sentence. It was the most powerful and feared mafia boss in the city, and his words were not a request, they were a decree. From this moment, you're mine. Now, trapped in a world of shadows and violence she never knew existed, she must find a way to survive. Everyone would have told her to run, to hide, to give in to the fear. But she is about to discover that even the darkest hearts can be changed, and the most fragile people can become the strongest. This is not just a story of danger, it's a story of unexpected redemption and the courage to find light in the most impossible darkness. Before we dive into this incredible story of fate and transformation, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. This helps us bring more inspiring and thrilling stories like this one directly to you. Now, let's begin Chapter 1. The Wrong Number. The rain was a relentless, rhythmic drum against the window pane of Alara's tiny studio apartment. It blurred the neon sign of the bodega across the street, painting the world outside in streaks of anxious red and lonely blue. Inside, the only light came from her laptop, its screen glowing with a spreadsheet that seemed to mock her with its endless columns of numbers. Alara Vance was buried in the quiet desperation of freelance accounting. It was a Friday night, and while the city of Newbridge hummed with the promise of weekend revelry, her world had shrunk to the size of her desk, littered with coffee mugs and invoices. The deadline for a major client's audit was Monday, and the stress was a tight, constant knot between her shoulders. Her phone, face up on the desk, buzzed and skittered like an angry insect. She jumped, her heart giving a frantic leap. The caller ID flashed, unknown number. Clients. It was always clients, calling from blocked lines at all hours. With a weary sigh, she swiped to answer without looking, cradling the phone between her shoulder and ear as she continued typing. Alara Vance, freelance accounting, she said, her voice a practiced blend of professionalism and fatigue. Silence greeted her. Not dead air, but a heavy, breathing silence, the kind that felt occupied. She could faintly hear the low, smooth notes of a jazz clarinet and the distinct clink of ice in a glass in the background. Hello, she repeated, irritation cutting through her tiredness. Mr. Jenkins, if this is about the quarterly reports, I assured you I'm... Who is this? The voice was not Mr. Jenkins. It was a man's voice, deep and calm, but with an undercurrent of something that made the fine hairs on her arm stand up. It was a voice used to being obeyed, a voice that didn't ask questions so much as demand answers. It was polished, almost elegant, but it carried the chilling weight of absolute authority. Alara froze, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. You called me. This is Alara Vance. How did you get this number? The question was delivered softly, but it felt like a threat. It came up on my caller ID. You're the one who called me, she insisted, her own voice gaining a defensive edge. This was the last thing she needed. A prank call. A telemarketer from the depths of hell. Another pause. She could almost feel him analyzing her tone, dissecting her fear and frustration. The jazz music stopped abruptly. You answered a call meant for someone else, he stated, the finality in his tone leaving no room for argument. A man who has made a very, very grave error. A cold dread, entirely different from the anxiety of her work, began to pool in her stomach. This wasn't a prank. The gravity in his voice was too real, too dangerous. I think you have the wrong, she began, but he cut her off. There are no wrong numbers tonight, Miss Vance. Only consequences. The way he said her name, as if he already owned it, turned her blood to ice. He had taken the 2 words she'd given him, her name, and now held them with an intimacy that was terrifying. The man who was supposed to answer this call was meant to hear his own death sentence. He was a rat. A betrayer. He thought he could hide from me. Alara's breath hitched. Her hand flew to her mouth. This wasn't happening. It was a dream, a stress-induced hallucination. Mafia. The word exploded in her mind, cartoonish and absurd, yet it was the only thing that fit the terrifying elegance of this man's menace. I didn't hear anything. I swear. I'll just hang up, And we can both forget this ever happened, she stammered, her words tumbling out in a rushed, panicked whisper. A low, humorless chuckle echoed down the line. It was the most frightening sound she had ever heard. Forget. No one forgets a conversation with me. You have heard what you have heard. You now possess a piece of information that is lethal. That makes you a loose end. And I do not tolerate loose ends. Tears of pure terror welled in her eyes. She was going to die because of a misplaced phone call. Because she'd been too tired to check the screen. The absurdity of it was almost as crushing as the fear. Please, she begged, the word a broken sob. I'm nobody. I'm an accountant. I live alone. I won't tell anyone. I promise. The line was silent for so long she thought he might have hung up. She prayed he had. Then he spoke again. His voice had changed. The outright menace had receded, replaced by a contemplative, almost curious tone. An accountant, he mused, as if she'd just revealed she was a unicorn. You have a very honest voice. There is fear in it, but no deceit. Not yet. Ilara stayed silent, trembling, clutching the phone as if it were a lifeline instead of the instrument of her doom. This is not your world, Miss Vance, he continued, his voice dropping to a low, mesmerizing murmur. You are a bystander who stepped onto the highway at the wrong moment. A fateful error. He let the words hang in the air, the static on the line crackling with tension. My men will be at the betrayer's location within minutes. They will find him, and they will tidy up. If you were to call the police, it would be a profound inconvenience. It would force my hand. Do you understand the position you are in? She could only manage a weak, strangled whimper. Your silence is your only currency now. But silence alone is not enough. It can be broken. It must be guaranteed. Ilara squeezed her eyes shut, waiting for the order to pack a bag, to meet someone in a dark alley, to become a part of the nightmare she had accidentally overheard. His next words were not what she expected. They were worse. From this moment, you're mine. The declaration was absolute. It wasn't a question. It was a fundamental rewriting of her reality. What does that mean? She whispered. It means your life, as you knew it, is over. It means you are under my protection, and by extension my control. You will not speak of this. You will go about your life. You will continue to be an accountant. And you will wait. Wait for what? The question was a breath of air. For my call. Do not change your number. Do not try to hide. There is nowhere you could go that I would not find you. This phone is now your lifeline. You will answer it when I call. Is that clear? It was a command. The first of many. Yes, she choked out, the word tasting like ash. The line went dead. Ilara sat in the sudden, crushing silence of her apartment. The rain continued to fall. The spreadsheet still glowed on her screen. But everything was different. The world had tilted on its axis. The ordinary objects of her life, her favorite mug, the framed photo of her parents, the comfortable clutter, now seemed like artifacts from a past life. She was still holding the phone, her knuckles white. She was no longer just Ilara Vance, struggling freelance accountant. She was Ilara Vance, who belonged to a monster. And she knew, with a certainty that froze her soul, that the phone would ring again. And when it did, her old life would be officially and irrevocably over. The unseen gaze. The phone clattered onto the desk. The sound was unnaturally loud in the dead silence that followed. Ilara's hands were shaking so violently she had to clasp them together, her nails digging into her own skin just to feel something other than the sheer, vertiginous terror. The voice was gone, but its echo remained, seared into her mind. From this moment, you're mine. For 10 full minutes, she didn't move. She just stared at the dark screen of her phone, half expecting it to light up again with another impossible command. Every rational thought screamed at her to call the police, to run, to do something. But his warning was a shackle around her will. It would be a profound inconvenience. It would force my hand. She knew, with a primal certainty, that he wasn't bluffing. Calling the police wouldn't save her. It would just sign her death warrant faster. The rain had softened to a drizzle, but the world outside her window felt alien and threatening. Every passing car was a potential surveillance vehicle. Every shadow between the buildings hid a man sent to watch her. The cozy confinement of her studio now felt like a glass box, exposing her to a city that had suddenly turned predatory. A new, more insidious fear began to worm its way through the initial shock, the fear of the unknown. What did your mind actually mean? Was she a prisoner? An asset? A pet? The ambiguity was a torture in itself. Her mind, sharpened by years of dealing with concrete numbers and logical outcomes, scrambled for a purchase on this new, horrifying reality and found none. Driven by a desperate need to regain some sliver of control, she did the only thing she could think of. She slowly, carefully picked up her phone. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she opened her recent calls. The unknown number was right at the top. With a trembling finger, she tapped on it, hoping for some clue, a geographic location, a business name, anything. The screen simply read, restricted. Defeated, she placed the phone back on the desk, screen down, as if that could contain the threat it represented. She tried to return to her spreadsheet, to lose herself in the familiar comfort of debits and credits, but the numbers swam before her eyes. They were meaningless. How could she care about a client's tax deductions when her entire existence had been hijacked? A sudden, sharp knock at her door shattered the silence. Elara jolted, a gasp catching in her throat. Her eyes flew to the digital clock on her microwave. 10:47 p.m. No one visited her this late. Ever. His men. They're here. This is it. She stood frozen, her body coiled tight with panic. The knock came again, louder this time. More impatient. Do not try to hide. There is nowhere you could go that I would not find you. His words echoed in her head, a chilling reminder of her powerlessness. Hiding was pointless. With legs that felt like lead, she forced herself to move toward the door. She didn't open it. Instead, she leaned in, peering through the tiny peephole. Her breath left her in a rush, a mixture of relief and residual anxiety. It was Mrs. Gable, her elderly neighbor from across the hall, bundled in a worn floral robe, her hair in curlers. In her hands was a small, familiar ceramic plate with a slice of lemon drizzle cake on it. A weekly ritual. Mrs. Gable baked when she couldn't sleep and shared the results. Elara's hand shook as she undid the chain and deadbolt, her mind reeling. The ordinary had just collided violently with the extraordinary. She opened the door a crack, hoping her face didn't look as ravaged by fear as it felt. "Elara, dear, I saw your light on," Mrs. Gable chirped, her voice a dry rustle. "I thought you could use a little pick-me-up. You work too hard." Thank you, Mrs. Gable," Elara stammered, taking the plate. The warmth of the cake seeped through the ceramic, a stark contrast to the cold dread in her veins. The old woman's sharp eyes narrowed slightly. "Are you all right, dear? You look pale as a ghost. Is it that dreadful Jenkins account giving you trouble again?" The mundane concern was almost painful. "Yes," Elara lied, the word tasting bitter. "Just a tough night. Thank you for this. Really." She needed to close the door. She needed to be alone with her terror. "Well, you eat that and get some rest," Mrs. Gable said, already turning away. "Don't work all night. Good night, dear." "Good night," Elara whispered, closing the door and locking it with a finality that felt utterly meaningless. She leaned her back against it, sliding down to the floor, the plate of cake resting on her knees. The simple kindness of a gesture had somehow made everything feel worse, more isolating. She was now living a double life, and the innocent world of lemon cake and neighborly concern was one she was no longer allowed to fully inhabit. She set the plate aside, untouched. Her eyes landed back on her phone. An idea, desperate and reckless, sparked in her mind. He had told her not to change her number, not to try to hide. He hadn't said anything about the internet. Scrambling to her laptop, she opened a search engine. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. What did she even search for? Powerful criminal Newbridge. Mafia boss. It sounded insane. She took a different tack, thinking about his voice, the jazz music, the clink of ice. This wasn't a thug in a track suit. This was a man of refined, terrifying taste. She typed, Newbridge high-profile businessman rumors. The results were a mix of local news and gossip blog links. She scrolled, her eyes scanning headlines about corporate takeovers and charity galas. Nothing. She tried again, her searches growing more specific and more frantic. New club owner Newbridge. Import, export tycoon Newbridge. Infamous businessman Newbridge underworld. An hour bled away, filled with dead ends and vague forum posts hinting at shadowy figures who controlled the city from penthouses and private clubs. She was about to give up, the hopelessness closing in again, when she stumbled upon a years-old article from a now-defunct alt weekly. The headline was vague: "The Ghost of Newbridge, the Man Who Owns the Night." The article was heavily redacted by lawsuits, even in its digital form, filled with redacted and alleged and sources claim. But it mentioned a man, a reclusive, impossibly wealthy figure with interests in shipping, real estate, and entertainment. A man known for his ruthlessness in business and his absolute anonymity. The article's author had been threatened into obscurity. The man had a name, but it was one of the redacted blocks. And then she saw it, a single, unredacted quote from an anonymous source, a former associate. It was a description that made her blood run cold. "You never see him coming. He's a ghost, but he sees you. He loves jazz, you know. Old school. Always listening to it in his office high above the city. Says it's the only thing that makes sense in a world of chaos. That's how he thinks. He's the composer, and the rest of us, we're just the instruments. Or the wrong notes he has to eliminate. Jazz. High above the city." Ilara's eyes widened. It was him. She was sure of it. She frantically scanned the article for a name, a company, anything. But there was nothing more. Just that haunting description. Suddenly, her laptop screen flickered. The browser window containing the article froze, then abruptly closed itself. A cold prickle ran down her spine. She tried to reopen it. Page not found. She went back to the search results. The link was gone. It had been scrubbed from the internet in the time it took her to read it. He was watching, not just in person, but everywhere. Her digital footsteps were being erased in real time. The message was clear. Her search for knowledge was forbidden. She was to remain in the dark, a pawn waiting for the player's next move. The unseen gaze was upon her, and her prison, she realized with a sinking horror, had no walls. It was built entirely of fear and the terrifying, omnipresent will of a man named only by a ghost. The first command: 3 days, 72 hours of a silence so profound it was its own form of torture. Ilara moved through her life like a ghost haunting her own body. She went to the grocery store, her eyes darting at every reflection, flinching at every sudden noise. She tried to work, but the numbers on the screen had lost all meaning, replaced by the echoing decree: "From this moment, you're mine." Sleep was impossible. Every creak of the old building's pipes was a footstep. Every car door slamming outside was his men arriving. She existed in a state of suspended animation, jumping at her own shadow, the phone a malevolent idol on her coffee table. She charged it obsessively, terrified the battery might die and he would interpret it as disobedience. The fear had begun to curdle into a strange, numb exhaustion. The initial, sharp terror had blunted into a constant, low-grade hum of anxiety. She was starting to wonder if it had all been a hallucination, a stress-induced psychotic break. Maybe she had imagined the whole thing. On the afternoon of the third day, the sun broke through the clouds for the first time since the call. A weak, golden light streamed into her apartment, making the dust motes dance. For a fleeting second, a sliver of hope dared to bloom in her chest. Maybe it was over. Maybe he had forgotten her. Maybe she had been a momentary curiosity, now discarded. The illusion shattered at 3:17 p.m. The phone didn't ring. It vibrated. A single, short, precise buzz. A text message. Ilara's heart stopped. She was across the room in a second, snatching the device off the table. Her hands were instantly slick with sweat. The screen glowed with a single line of text from the same, restricted number. The ledger. Apartment 4B. 1812 Elm Street. Retrieve it. Be there in 1 hour. The words were a punch to the gut. This was it. The waiting was over. The command had come. Retrieve it. It sounded so simple, so mundane. But it wasn't. It was a threshold. Doing this meant crossing over from a victim of circumstance into an active participant in his world. She would be handling whatever a man like him considered important. She would be his errand girl. And apartment 4B. Was that the betrayer's apartment? The place where he had been. Tidied up. Her stomach lurched. She was being sent to the scene of a murder. Panic threatened to swallow her whole. She couldn't do this. She wouldn't. She stared at the message, her mind screaming in revolt. As if he could hear her thoughts, a second message arrived. The door will be open. Do not be seen. Do not speak to anyone. Failure has consequences you cannot imagine. The threat was implicit, colder and more effective than any shouted warning. Consequences. Not just for her. For Mrs. Gable. For anyone she might ever care about. His control was absolute because it was built on the unknown, on the terrifying breadth of what his consequences might entail. A strange calm descended upon her, the eerie stillness that follows a decision made under duress. There was no choice. There was only obedience. She had to move. She pulled on a dark gray hoodie and jeans, her hands trembling as she tied her hair back into a tight, practical ponytail. She looked at herself in the mirror. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with fear, but there was a new hardness in them, a grim resolve she didn't recognize. The accountant was receding, the survivor was taking over. Elm Street was a 20-minute bus ride away, a line of slightly run-down brownstones in a neighborhood that was slowly gentrifying. The entire journey was a blur of heightened senses. She watched every person who got on and off the bus, convinced they were his watchers, reporting her every move. She kept her head down, the hood pulled up, hiding in plain sight. 1812 Elm Street, a 4-story building with a faded awning and a set of stone steps leading to a heavy front door. Her heart was a frantic drum against her ribs. She climbed the steps, her legs feeling weak. She expected the front door to be locked, to have to buzz, to have to explain herself. She pushed it gently. It swung open without a sound. The lobby was dim and smelled of old carpet and disinfectant. It was empty. The door will be open. Of course it was. He had arranged everything. Her throat was desert dry. Apartment 4B. 4th floor. She took the stairs, avoiding the creaky elevator, her sneakers making no sound on the linoleum steps. The higher she climbed, the heavier the silence became. It was the silence of a vacant building, but it felt occupied. Watched. The door to 4B was slightly ajar. A sliver of darkness beckoned from within. This was it, the moment of no return. She placed a shaking hand on the cool wood and pushed. The apartment was dark, the curtains drawn. A sliver of afternoon light cut across the floor, illuminating dust particles dancing in the air. It was sparsely furnished, impersonal. A rental. But there was a smell. Beneath the faint odor of stale air was a sharp, chemical tang. Bleach. The acrid scent of a frantic, professional cleaning. Her eyes scanned the living room. A sofa, a coffee table, a blank television screen. Nothing seemed out of place. It looked normal. Too normal. It was the terrifying normalcy of a stage after the play was over, the violence scrubbed away, leaving only the pristine, lying set. The ledger. What did it look like? Where was it? Her instructions were maddeningly vague. She moved on unsteady legs, her breath shallow, trying not to inhale too much of the bleach-scented air. She checked the kitchen counters. Nothing. She moved toward the small desk in the corner. And then she saw it. It was a simple, black, leather-bound notebook about the size of a paperback novel. It was sitting squarely in the center of the desk, as if placed there just for her. It was the only thing in the entire apartment that seemed to have purpose, to have intent. This was it, the object a man had died for, the reason she was here. She reached for it, her fingers hovering just above the cover. Touching it felt like touching death itself. She snatched it up, the leather cool against her skin. It felt innocuous, ordinary. The banality of it was somehow the most frightening thing of all. She shoved it deep into the front pocket of her hoodie, the weight of it feeling immense against her stomach. A floorboard creaked in the hallway outside the apartment. Ilara froze, her blood turning to ice. She wasn't alone. She stood statue still in the center of the dark room, not daring to breathe. She heard the murmur of voices, low and casual, moving past the door and continuing down the hall. Neighbors. Ordinary people living ordinary lives, completely unaware of the ghost who had just visited their building. The sheer normality of the sound broke the spell. She had to get out. She slipped out of the apartment, pulling the door shut behind her until she heard the soft click of the latch. She didn't run. She forced herself to walk calmly, steadily, back down the 4 flights of stairs, through the empty lobby, and out into the afternoon sun. The light felt assaultive. She blinked, her hand instinctively going to her hoodie pocket, feeling the hard outline of the ledger. She had done it. She had crossed over. She was halfway down the block when her phone buzzed again. A new message. The bench. Memorial Park. Now. He had been watching. He knew she had succeeded, and the game wasn't over. It had just begun. Without a moment's hesitation, without a single thought of defiance, Elara turned and began walking toward the park. She was his, and she was moving to his command. He instrument. Memorial Park was a postage stamp of green in the heart of the city, a place for office workers to eat lunch and for pigeons to stage their endless conventions. Elara walked there on autopilot, her hand never leaving the lump in her hoodie pocket. The ledger felt like it was burning a hole through the fabric, radiating a malevolent energy that seemed to pulse in time with her heartbeat. The bench was exactly where he'd said it would be, tucked under the skeletal branches of a large oak tree, away from the main paths. It was empty. She sat down, her body stiff, her eyes scanning the park. A mother pushed a stroller. A couple shared headphones, lost in their own world. An old man fed the pigeons, all of them oblivious. Which one was his? Which set of eyes was reporting her every move back to him? They all looked innocent. They all looked like potential threats. She didn't have to wait long. A young man in a dark, impeccably tailored suit approached. He moved with an unnerving economy of motion, his expression neutral, his eyes hidden behind sunglasses despite the overcast sky. He looked like a high-end banker or a lawyer, not a criminal enforcer. This, she realized, was part of the disguise. The brutality was hidden behind a veneer of professionalism. He sat down on the far end of the bench, not looking at her. He placed a sleek, black tablet computer beside him. "The item," he said, his voice a low, dispassionate monotone. Wordlessly, her throat too tight to speak, Elara pulled the ledger from her pocket and placed it on the bench between them. He didn't immediately pick it up. Instead, he tapped the screen of the tablet, waking it up. "Your instructions are on the screen. Read them. Memorize them. You have 60 seconds, he said, his gaze fixed on the pigeons pecking at the ground a few feet away. Elara leaned over slightly. On the tablet screen was a scanned document, an invoice for maritime shipping containers. It listed ports of origin, contents, machine parts, and values. It looked utterly mundane, but highlighted in yellow were several line items. The container numbers, the dates, and the values were all slightly, deliberately wrong. The math in the totals column was incorrect, creating a discrepancy of several $100,000. "This is a fraud," she whispered, the accountant in her recognizing the pattern instantly. It was a siphon, a classic skim operation hidden in plain sight. The man didn't acknowledge her statement. "Your task is to find the error in the attached financial statements for Castellano Shipping for the last quarter. The documents are corrupted. The digital files are unrecoverable. You will work from paper copies. You will find the inconsistency, and you will document it, using your professional letterhead and credentials. You will be a freelance auditor discovering an accounting anomaly. Nothing more." He finally turned his head a fraction of an inch toward her. The sunglasses made him look inhuman. "You will not mention the invoice you just saw. You will derive your findings solely from the statements you are given. Do you understand the difference?" Elara's mind raced. She understood perfectly. He wasn't just having her do accounting. He was having her launder his own investigation. She was to provide a legitimate, independent audit trail that would expose the fraud, but without ever revealing the source of the tip-off, the very ledger she had just retrieved. She was to be the clean, credible face of his ruthless cleanup operation. He was making her his instrument. "I understand," she said, her voice barely audible. "Good." He slid a thick, sealed manila envelope from inside his suit jacket and placed it on the bench. "The documents. You have 24 hours. A secure email will be sent to you for the report. Use your professional account. The report must be impeccable." He finally picked up the ledger, tucking it inside his jacket with the same smooth motion. He stood up, adjusting his cufflinks. The entire exchange had taken less than 2 minutes. "How?" Elara started, a question forming before she could stop it. "How did you know that I could do this?" The man paused, looking down at her for the first time. A faint, cold smile touched his lips. He knows everything, Miss Vance. Your university transcripts. Your client list. The audit you performed for Newbridge General that uncovered the embezzlement 3 years ago. He doesn't employ amateurs, even accidental ones. The revelation was more violating than any threat. While she had been paralyzed with fear, he had been meticulously researching her. He hadn't just claimed her life, he had studied it, assessed her skills, and had already found a use for her. Her entire identity had been reduced to a line on a professional resume that had landed on a monster's desk. Without another word, the man turned and walked away, melting into the foot traffic and disappearing from view. Ilara sat on the bench for a long time, the heavy envelope in her lap. The weight of it was different from the ledger. This wasn't just an item, it was a task, a purpose, a twisted, horrifying purpose, but it was the first thing that had required her to use her own mind in daze. She walked home in a daze, but it was a different kind of daze than before. The numb terror was now mixed with a chilling sense of clarity. He didn't just want her silence. He wanted her skill, her legitimacy. Back in her apartment, she broke the seal on the envelope and spread the financial statements across her desk. It was a mess. Coffee stains, crumpled pages, exactly what one would expect from corrupted files that had been salvaged. She ignored the squalor of her situation and did what she did best. She began to work. Hours bled together. The outside world faded away. There was only the columns of numbers, the patterns, the logic. She cross-referenced, calculated, and traced. She found the discrepancies, the same ones from the invoice, cleverly hidden within the larger context of the company's finances. It was brilliant, really. A work of criminal art. And she was the restorer, painstakingly revealing the forgery. As she worked, a terrifying thought took root. This was a test. He was assessing her value, her compliance, her usefulness. Her survival, she realized, was no longer just about obedience. It was about performance. She finished just before dawn, her report concise, professional, and damning. She attached it to an email as instructed, her finger hovering over the send button. This was it, the final step. By sending this, she wasn't just following an order. She was becoming his accomplice. She was using her hard-won credentials, her reputation for honesty, to cover his tracks. She thought of the voice on the phone, the man in the park, the consequences. She clicked send. The email whooshed away into the ether. She expected to feel guilt, shame, horror. Instead, a strange, defiant energy coursed through her. She had been used, but she had also proven herself. She had looked into the abyss of his world and had not just survived, she had performed. She was no longer just a victim. She was a resource. And as the first light of dawn painted her walls gray, Ilara Vance understood the new rules of her existence. Her value was her protection. And if she was going to be an instrument, she would become an indispensable one. She waited for his call, not just with fear, but with a newly forged, razor-sharp resolve. The game had changed. The indispensable woman. The response to her email arrived not as a call or a text, but as a delivery. At precisely 8 a.m., a sharp knock echoed through her apartment. Ilara, who had not slept, was still at her desk, staring at the now blank screen where her damning report had been. She opened the door to find a uniformed courier holding a flat, rectangular box, the kind that might hold expensive stationery or a fine scarf. "For Miss Vance," he said cheerfully, handing her an electronic pad to sign. Her signature was a shaky scrawl. She took the box, closed the door, and leaned against it, her heart thumping. Was this it? A final payment before a bullet? A bomb? Her hands trembled as she untied the simple black ribbon and lifted the lid. There was no note, no explanation. Nestled inside on a bed of black tissue paper was a smartphone. It was sleek, obsidian black, and utterly devoid of any brand markings. It was heavier than it looked, cold to the touch. Next to it lay a single, pristine white business card. Embossed on it in elegant, raised black lettering was a name, Lucian Thorne, and below it, a single line, Castellano Holdings. Lucian Thorne. The ghost had a name. It was solid, powerful, real. It was the name of the man who owned her. The company was a ghost, too. A legitimate-sounding umbrella she was certain hid a multitude of sins. This was his acknowledgement. This was her new lifeline. As she stared at the name, the new phone lit up with a soft, internal glow. A single line of text appeared on its screen. The phone is secure. Use it exclusively. Your old number will be disconnected. Your services are required. Be ready. The command was no less absolute, but the tone was different. It was the tone of a CEO addressing a valued employee. The fear was still there, a constant companion, but it was now joined by something else, a perverse threat of validation. He had liked her work. Her old phone, still lying on the coffee table, chose that moment to chime with a generic network message. Service disconnected. The finality of it was breathtaking. Elara Vance, freelance accountant, was officially gone. She had been digitally erased and reborn as whatever Lucian Thorne required her to be. The new phone remained silent for the rest of the day. The anticipation was a new kind of agony. Be ready for what? When? She showered, dressed in professional clothes, armor against whatever was coming, and waited. She tried to eat but couldn't. The world outside her window continued its ignorant dance. At 7 p.m., the black phone emitted a different sound. Not a buzz or a ring, but a single clear chime. A message appeared. A car will collect you in 10 minutes. Bring your professional mind. No please. No question. A statement of fact. Elara's hands were cold, but her mind was preternaturally clear. This was the next test. She slipped the phone into her pocket, grabbed her bag, and without a second thought, walked out of her apartment. A long, black sedan with tinted windows was idling at the curb. It looked like it belonged to a diplomat. The rear door opened silently as she approached. She slid inside. The interior smelled of leather and sandalwood. The driver, separated by a privacy partition, didn't acknowledge her. The car moved smoothly through the evening traffic, heading toward the glittering heart of the city's financial district. It didn't stop at any of the towering, corporate-owned skyscrapers. Instead, it slid into the private underground garage of the Obelisk, a legendary Art Deco building known for its exclusive condominiums and silent, unseen residents. A private elevator awaited them. The driver used a key, and they ascended in a silent, gilded box that didn't stop until it reached the penthouse. The doors opened not into a hallway, but directly into a vast, breathtaking space. The entire west wall was floor-to-ceiling glass, offering a panoramic view of the city lights, twinkling like a spilled diamond necklace. The room was sparsely but perfectly furnished, low-slung Italian leather sofas, a single monumental piece of abstract art on one wall, and in the center of it all, a grand piano. The air was cool and still. And there he was. Lucian Thorne stood by the window, his back to her, a crystal tumbler of amber liquid in one hand. He was taller than she had imagined, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark suit that fit him like a second skin. He didn't turn as she entered. "Sit," he said. The voice. It was him. But in person, it was richer, deeper, a physical force that vibrated in the spacious room. She moved to the sofa and sat on the very edge, her back straight. He finally turned. He was older than she'd pictured, perhaps in his late 40s, with streaks of silver at his temples cutting through dark hair. His face was all sharp angles and calculated calm, but his eyes, they were the coldest, most intelligent eyes she had ever seen. They didn't just look at her. They dissected her, assessing her fear, her resolve, her usefulness, all in a single, unnerving glance. "The report was adequate," he stated, moving to an armchair opposite her. He didn't thank her. Adequacy was the highest praise she would likely ever receive. "The man you replaced was skimming from me. Using the methods you uncovered," he continued, sipping his drink. "Your work provided the necessary leverage. The matter is now concluded." Concluded. She didn't want to know what that meant. "Why am I here?" The question left her lips before she could stop it. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched his mouth. "Because you are now an asset, and I take care of my assets. You have a choice to make, Miss Vance. A choice." The word felt alien. "You can continue to be a problem I manage, a loose and I am forced to protect." His voice was soft, deadly. "Or you can become a solution. You can be of value. The first option has a finite lifespan. The second offers unique rewards. He gestured to the view, to the immense, silent power of the penthouse. You have a mind that sees truth in chaos. That is a rare commodity. I have need of it. The choice is not whether you work for me. That decision was made the moment you answered your phone. The choice is how you will work for me. In fear, or with purpose. He was offering her a deal with the devil. But he was framing it as a promotion. Her survival for her soul. Ilara looked from his impassive face to the breathtaking cityscape below. She thought of the fear, the helplessness, the cold envelope in the park. Then she thought of the work, the sharp clarity of the puzzle she had solved, the terrifying respect in his voice when he said adequate. She was in a cage, but he was offering her the key to a larger, gilded one. It was still a prison, but she could choose to be the warden instead of the inmate. She met his gaze, and for the first time, she didn't look away. The terror was still there, but it was now a tool she could use. A fuel. "What do you need me to do?" she asked, her voice steady, clear, and devoid of hesitation. Lucian Thorne's smile widened, a thin, dangerous curve of his lips. He had his answer. The wrong number had been dialed, but he had found the right woman. "From this moment," he said, his voice a low promise, "we begin. Before you go, if this story of unexpected transformation and finding strength in the most impossible circumstances resonated with you, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. Your support helps us bring you more powerful stories of resilience and hidden courage. What did you think Ilara's choice would be? Let us know in the comments below.